Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is Bobby Cobb with the Presence Posse. Joining me today is Dr. Fred Blum, and we are talking today about presence and polarization. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so this is going to be a bit of an abbreviated show because we both have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So we will get right into it. Fred, tell me when you hear the title Presence and Polarization, what initially comes to mind? Is it something of difficulty keeping presence, or do you see it as a tool to help you keep present or a catalyst for inquiry? What comes up with polarization when you're playing in presence?
Well, everything is a catalyst for inquiry, I guess. So,
Can be,
I would say
for
yes.
sure.
Let me turn this light on. I don't know if that helps at all. Well, maybe it does. I tell you what, the first thing that comes to my mind, which is probably what comes to a lot of people's minds in the current times, which would be, the polarization that we're experiencing in the world today. Tomorrow here in the U.S. is election day, so we will see. I don't imagine whoever wins the polarization is going to become any less after that is settled one way or another. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways we could talk about polarization, right? The essence of it is one way to think about it is duality. In other words, we can't really experience polarization. And I'm probably, maybe we should think about definitions, what that word means.
I think that's a great place to begin, actually.
Yeah, right. So this is just what occurs to me, because we always do these podcasts, folks, like we don't rehearse these or discuss them or anything in advance.
We are practicing presence when we are,
and we may find ourselves in polarization. Let's see. I don't expect we will, but so we didn't discuss even what we meant. Somebody came up, I think maybe Bobby, you came up with this title, and that was all of the discussion
out of the last show that we did.
Great. Yeah. So polarization to me, essentially, to put it in sort of language that we've been using forever on this show, is basically where two egos are at odds with each other, where I see life from this perspective and you see life from this perspective, and we're so caught in the ego, holds its point of view as sacred. Because, let's be honest, the ego in itself really is just a point of view, a very ingrained, conditioned, and well-developed point of view. Probably, but, therefore it thinks of any point of view that it holds, like about politics or whatever, as sacred, as almost part of itself. So if I'm coming from my ego perspective, that's who I think I am, is this created identity, then any point of view that I have, or any point of view that you have that doesn't agree with mine, you're going to look to some extent like an enemy, like a problem, And again, if we look at the current state of affairs in politics, that kind of bears itself out.
Yeah, we're probably going to be experiencing a polarization gasm tomorrow with the depending on how it unfolds. And
I think regardless of how it unfolds.
But yeah, probably so. Probably regardless of how it unfolds. I've been somewhat public with the fact that I'm not voting for either of the two major candidates in the United States, and you cannot believe the number of private DMs and pleads from people saying you've got to vote for Kamala or you've got to vote for Trump, whoever they're voting for. They're sending me these. They're just really detailed emotional pleas about all of the reasons that I need to adopt their point of view,
Yeah.
and how adopting my own point of view, which, not that anybody cares, but just out of curiosity, my big thing is I feel like the country is really spending itself into oblivion. And there's one guy that's talking about that. His name is Chase Oliver. He's the Libertarian Party candidate, and he got my vote. And, people are saying on both sides that I've wasted my vote. And I mean, I don't really see it that way. I sort of feel like I am expressing what is important to me, what's showing up for me right now. But it's this weird place that I've been in for the past couple of weeks, because I think the stuff that I write about is vague and general enough that people both think, they both assume that I'm voting for their candidate, and other people assume that I'm against their candidate. And that's true whether the candidate is Trump or Kamala. And the level of threat that people are expressing that if their candidate doesn't win, and this is true on both sides, is that it just seems really, really dire.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think is going on there? I mean, we've survived a Trump presidency. We've survived a Biden presidency. The country's still functioning just fine. We can do no. I mean, there's challenges, obviously, but the world is not coming to an end. How do people get to that existential threat so quickly these days?
Yeah,
Where,
that's what it is, right? I mean, now look, maybe that's true. I don't know. I can't necessarily buy into the hype that just automatic. I mean, this is the most consequential election of our lifetime. How many people are saying that? And they said that last time, and they said that the time before that. If we look, there are always people saying it. Yeah, but this time, for sure. And I mean, maybe things are coming to a head. We'll find out, one way or another. But again, it's like if you can't continue to love your neighbor regardless of who they vote for, or regardless of their opinions, or regardless of whether they wear a mask or not, or all these different positions, then that's for you to explore. It's not your neighbor that needs to change in order for you to love them. And I know that can be hard sometimes. I know that we're not perfect at it as human beings, but that's the edge for us. The edge is, can we, be in presence and see that this is just another human being in this dream world that we all live
yeah,
in. Yes, I quote it all the time. We are in the world, but not of the world. And all this stuff, polarization, period, regardless of what it's about, can only happen in the world. That's
yeah,
the only place it can exist. So the more that your perspective is limited to your in the world position, honestly, the more you're going to suffer. I think there's a pretty safe correlation there. And for that matter, I'm not suggesting that we all drop out like we are also not of this world, that we all just go into spiritual, namaste land and, pretend like there's nothing actually happening. Whatever level of engagement in this process, politics, whatever, feels right to you, I think that's okay. And if you can't do it with peace in your heart, that's your edge. That's where you could begin to examine, be in self-inquiry about what it is that keeps you from being at peace. And I can tell you this much. If your answer has to do with anybody but you, I would keep looking.
Well, maybe it's helpful then to just kind of, we know that in duality, and people are perceiving that they only have a binary decision.
Mhm.
They really have got lots of options. There's, five or six people that are running. Only two probably have a decent chance of winning, or maybe even the slimmest of chances of winning. It's going to be one of those two. But in the binary, then half of the people almost are going to be kind of upset. So, how about if we play around a little bit with how to use when life doesn't go our way, to use that as a catalyst to kind of go within and check things out and use that as a reset. And actually, let me just tell a quick story that doesn't really have to do with polarization, but it happened to me. And maybe it does kind of, actually, it might have to do with polarization. We have a new puppy and it's not housebroken yet.
Mm.
So the guava and I are tag teaming. We're trying not to leave the puppy alone because it does really, really good when it's supervised. Yesterday, I was getting home as she was leaving, and so we crossed paths, and she was waiting to be picked up in the parking lot. I go walking into the house, and she gets into the car with her friends to go off to brunch. And I go to take duty, and she's already done her duty. She's pooed on the garage. So I'm immediately, I don't know what was going on with me in that world, but I did not react from a point of view of Zen in that moment, and like, ooh, poop is appearing. What do I do? I
It's
was like,
arriving.
I just immediately kind of jumped to, not, it wasn't anger, but like, how could you do that to me? And I texted her and I said, thanks for the nice poop present.
Welcoming gift.
Yeah, you left me to clean up on the floor. And so she gets that while she's at brunch and everything, looks at it, chooses wisely not to respond. So all of that's just processed, and probably thought to herself, I don't actually know. He's probably just having a bad moment, or maybe she didn't think anything of it at all. But when she came home, she said that text that you sent me was somewhat passive aggressive. And I'm still kind of learning that term a little bit. I mean, it's been around for such a long time, but I'm still kind of learning. And I say, tell me how that's passive aggressive. And she said, it's passive aggressive because you implied I knew it was there, and that I made a conscious decision to leave it for you to clean up. And I immediately took back, no, I didn't do that. I would never do that. And she said, go get your phone, read your text. And I go and read my text, and I'm like, yeah, I did that. And she goes, did you think that? And I said, no, of course not. I would never, and she would never do that. So immediately, to me, that's a little bit, that is a type of inquiry, going in and seeing, here's how you were reacting. That might mean that the story that you were telling yourself was XYZ. Is that story real?
Mm.
And just in that moment, all of that dissolved. And she said, were you mad that I was going out to lunch? And I said, no, I was actually thrilled that you were having, because these are two friends she hadn't seen in a while. And I was thrilled that you had the opportunity to go out. And she said, so what's the deal? And I honestly said, I have no idea. And in my mind, I tried to play it back, but just in the inquiry itself. And to me, this is you're kind of the inquiry coach, so you might have a lot more to say about that. But that's the beauty of the inquiry, that oftentimes when we look at things and just check it against, well, what must I believe, or what must the story be that I'm telling myself, or what must be going on inside of me to cause this to happen often gets it to evaporate. So if we were going to be coaching folks to say, hey, if your candidate doesn't win tomorrow, here's some exploration that you could do on your own, or just in general, how can you use,
Yes, yeah.
like, when polarity raises its head, how can you use that as an inquiry tool? How would you advise?
Yeah. Well, to me, there are two basic options as far as how we're going to inquire, and simply they would be the mind and or the body. So you're describing the mind approach, which is completely legit. It's questioning your thoughts, questioning your beliefs, all that kind of stuff. So from that perspective, like, of course, we've referred many times to Byron Katie on this show. Byron Katie, author of many books, the one Loving What Is, which is her first book, talks about this process of inquiry, which she calls the work. And the very first question, which you sort of alluded to already, Bobby, is that true? So in the context of the election, oh my God, how many questions could we inquire into the truth of? If Trump, / Harris wins, that will be the end of democracy, or some version of that. That each party is basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That just for just a second, that's been the unique thing about this weird little position that I've been in. They sound exactly the same. If I just took the names out and read some of these messages, you could not tell. They would be easily read, so you couldn't tell.
That might make for an interesting post in and of itself.
It might, yeah.
Don't put their names, just put the quotes, and then people, guess which person, guess who these people support, whatever, and you'll see, yeah, they're probably very similar. That's interesting. But so, if I'll just use one, if Trump wins the 2024 presidential election, that will be the end of our democracy. Okay. Is that true? If we do Byron Katie's work. So, and just that maybe we'll just talk through it real quick, because some people may not be familiar with this. We'll do the fast version of it.
We can role play it. I'll be the
okay, great. That's great idea. Okay, so let's assume that you're a big deal Kamala supporter, and you're worried, like you're telling your friends, maybe these are some of the messages you got, that this is about, if Trump wins, it's the end of our democracy. Okay. And Kamala supporters, we could be easily doing the other way. No, it's not, I'm not taking a position here.
Right.
So
yeah, I'm freaking out. I'm so nervous that tomorrow we're going to wake up on Wednesday and find out that our national nightmare is teed up for round 2, and I can't sleep. I'm sick about it.
So, parenthetically, you're talking about Trump winning, yes?
Yeah. I mean, it could be either, but yeah, in the scenario that you said, I'm
avid. No, just checking. Yeah. So if Trump wins, just to use your words, it will be a national nightmare. Is that true? Now, instructions briefly here for, again, people who may not be familiar with this. The first 2 questions, which you will get to the second one in a minute, are yes, no only. So it's not yes, but, or this is why I believe what I believe. None of that is part of this question. So coming back to the question, if Trump wins, it will be a national nightmare. Is that true?
I think it's not, but I'm going to, for the purpose of the role play, act as though.
Look.
It is.
It's Sideways Miriam.
Hello, Miriam.
Keep talking.
I don't know if you've been listening to us, but we're kind of in the midst of a little role play. So
we're pretend I'm not here.
We're going to roll on. So I'm going to say, yes, it's true. Everything that I've read, everything that I've seen.
Okay, now let me interrupt you for a second. The answer is yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So if Trump wins, that will be a national nightmare, can you absolutely know that that's true? That's the second question, folks.
No, I can't know that, because term one was awful as a Kamala supporter. I'm not a Kamala supporter, for the record, but it was not a nightmare. It sucked pretty bad, but I mean, the world did not end. We're still
Okay.
here.
And by the way, it's perfectly fine in this inquiry to give conflicting answers or the same answer. That's the nature of this, right? What we're exploring is the nature of a stressful thought, because when you think if Trump wins, it will be a national nightmare, that causes you some stress, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't sleep.
And
And I've lost my appetite.
right. And this actually brings us beautifully into the third question, which is what happens when you think and believe that thought that if Trump wins, it will be a national nightmare? You've already started to answer, but what else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not getting along with my family because I've got Trump supporters in my family, and where I go to spiritual services, I'm walking on eggshells now because we're a completely mixed group. Some people are Trump, some people are Harris, and so we just have we're sort of walking on eggshells. And
sort of polarized into your own separate groups.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it. We are polarizing into our little subgroups that we've got within our community.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting how easy it is to make our opinions more important than our relationships.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, say that again. I'm just going to say it.
I mean, it just occurred to me as you were speaking, but and I think it's very, very common, and it's been maybe for the last several years, that we can make our opinions, which is pure ego, more important than our relationships.
Wow. Yeah. I think Miriam has something to add.
Yes.
Or
the young lady in the back.
From a psychotherapeutic perspective, that is a survival mechanism. Or most often I would venture to say a survival mechanism, because if you don't agree with me, my life is in danger.
So and we're talking like an egoic version of that, not an
egoic version,
actual like life and death thing.
Yeah, that's how I understood your discussion. The thing is, when we're in an egoic, when we're sort of being consumed by the ego self, we don't understand necessarily that it's not us. So we are the ego. We identify with the ego. Right, if you don't agree with me, my life is in danger. I risk being ostracized, which means I have to survive on my own. I may not have the wherewithal to do that. So it can be experienced as my life. So in that case, it doesn't seem like it's my opinion.
Right.
It seems like it is the relationship that is in danger. Ergo, my life is in danger. And the beauty of presence, the more presence we have, the easier it is for us to see that that is an ego thought. It's an impression, not necessarily a reality. That's the beauty of bringing presence into this polarization.
Exact. That's what we're here to do, right? I'll just add one more thing, that in addition to the external fears like ostracization, I think I got enough zizzes in there, or loss of a relationship or whatever it may be. There's also the inner and largely unconscious fear that my opinions are me. And so a conflicting opinion is like a direct attack on me
On the
and
self. Yeah.
on the false self. And
Yeah.
so this is what we've done. And we've gone so deeply into these camps. Like we've, a lot of this stuff that gets called, identity politics or whatever we want to call it, the world is shifting more and more into a place where your opinions are who you are. In other words, a greater place of polarization. And hence, we don't know that this election is really as, some say it's the most consequential election of our lifetimes. We will see if that's true. But we can probably agree that it's one of the most polarized in a very long time. And maybe that's just because it's the current one. Like maybe we'll say that again in 2028.
Feels like the last two have been really, it feels like the last four at least have been pretty polarized.
Are we getting more? That's a perspective too, isn't it? Like, how do we even judge that? There's probably some social science way to measure that, but I don't know if there's any evidence or not of that. Hey, do you want to finish the inquiry?
Yes, and while we're out of the role play, real quick, I just want to talk about like when you ask that question, and I think it's cool that you said, "Hey, that just popped up," and that I think Miriam would say the same thing. I know I would. That oftentimes when I'm working with people, I'm showing up as presence as best as I can, and dealing with what shows up. And very often, just like that, things pop out of my mouth that I'm like, wow, where'd that come from? That's pretty cool. And that hit me when you said that to me, even though we're role playing, because I mean, the stuff going on at the Adams Center, I mean, we do have kind of two little factions there that are happening, and just saying, whatever it was that you said, it's easy sometimes to put our relationships or put our opinions ahead, or our need to be right ahead of our relationships. And it wasn't that that's what I was doing, because I'm kind of not doing that. But I mean, it's easy to see this is happening. What is going on, that we are, so let's go back in less analysis. So where we were.
What happens when you think the thought, if Trump is elected, it will be a national nightmare? What happens to you? Or is there more that we haven't discussed yet?
Yeah, it's the walking on eggshells and the nervousness around talking about politics, and which is, it's something that I'm very interested in. So that's been hard for me, because I know that a lot of people are not interested in my opinion. And based on what my opinion is today, almost 100% of the people who I might talk to are going to disagree with what I'm doing. And so who am I with that thought is, I'm walking on eggshells. I'm worried that I'm going to offend somebody, and I'm thinking down about the people. I'm wondering, how can they be so foolish to consider the other candidate, and why are they just not going with the one that I realize is the right one? That's who I am with that thought.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be an interesting experiment if, like, I don't know how, but let's just say you made it a commitment to only see the world through the eyes of a Trump supporter for, make it quick, like half an hour, and to really see it from that perspective, to value what they valued, and to see the world through that particular lens. How would that change your experience, do you think?
It dramatically, and that is, well, not with the Trump thing in the example. So staying in the role play, I just
Yeah,
know
no,
from
no,
the
no problem.
experience of doing that with other things that oftentimes it shows me something that I'm not seeing. And one of my go-to questions when I run into polarities in the world and divisions and conflict and all of that is to ask myself, what do they see that I'm not seeing?
Right.
And I go immediately, and which actually puts me into questioning mode, which that has served me well in real life, because as people engage me and say, how can you not be voting for Trump? How can you not be voting for Kamala? I say, it's just what I see. And I kind of briefly explain it. And I say, tell me what you think I'm missing. And so that gets a conversation going. Uh, and oftentimes it hasn't happened yet in politics, but oftentimes when I've applied that to other areas of my life, it's expanded my awareness and my options of it gets me out of my myopia. And sometimes I don't realize that I'm in a myopic mindset at this moment, that it's my way or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
just.
Which now what we're doing actually is we've kind of moved into the fourth question of the inquiry process, Byron Katie's inquiry process, which is, who would you be without that thought? So you're kind of already exploring that, but maybe, keep looking for a moment. So if you didn't have the thought, like you just never even occurred to you that if Trump wins, it will be a national nightmare. What does life look like now? How do these people look to you now?
Well, instead of thinking that they are the enemy, I just see them as having poor judgment and they're confused. They're
I
living.
question the word poor judgment. I mean, okay, I get that. Is it possible that they just have different judgment?
No, doctor. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I
There
mean, I just wonder.
and obviously we've got 330 million people looking at the news on a somewhat regular basis and coming to completely different conclusions based on this more or less the same set of facts.
I mean, it's a scary thought that to think that 165 million people have poor judgment. I mean,
Yes,
maybe
it
that is
is.
true. I don't know, but yeah. So, anything else? Who would you be if you couldn't think that thought?
I'd be back to me. I wouldn't be like the warrior with a cause and the standard bearer trying to get everybody to follow me on the path. And I'd be freer and less stressed, and maybe I might sleep.
I just noticed I could breathe better.
Just in that alone, yeah, it's a huge difference. And that's the beauty of. We can stay in. I don't want. I'm about to do commentary.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's all right. I know you're doing a good job of playing the role, but I know you want to keep coming out of it and talk about what you see.
yeah. But man, that one little question in there was enough to make a shift.
Mm.
And so maybe it's worth talking about in the inquiry process. Like we go from just exactly like my thing yesterday. I don't know if you heard the poop story, Miriam. Now it'll be my famous poop story. She's nodding that she did. And that had already been processed by the time that Carla came back home. But had it not, because, she's good at this kind of stuff too, plus she hears me doing it all the time with other people, so she knows how I'm wired, so she knows particularly well how to do it with me, which is such a blessing. But if I had have still been angry, if I was still carrying that, that would have dissolved it in a moment. And one of the things that I work with my clients on, and that I work with myself on as well, is catching myself when I'm wrestling with reality. And polarization, to me, is like the ultimate sign of wrestling with reality,
Sure.
because now we're in a tug of war with reality, and one of us is going to win and one of us is going to lose.
Yeah. And the reality can be as simple as you have a different opinion than me. Like that's reality. I believe this, you believe this. Okay. Can I come to terms with that reality without it having to mean anything, without it meaning anything about you or me? Like, either do I have to go to my superiority or your inferiority, uh, or poor judgment? Uh, or can I just see that we're two human beings, uh, really doing our best to just move along this life path that we're on? I mean, that polarization could apply to anything, not just to politics. Obviously, it could have. I mean, that's what I was kind of implying earlier. In the last maybe 5 or 6 years, it seems like that's all that matters is where you stand on any given issue.
Yeah.
That's like how we decide if you're a good person or not right now, is just what your opinions are about various matters. Miriam was raising her hand, I think.
I was just
Jump in.
thinking about, thank you. I was just thinking about, husbands and wives on opposite sides of anything, right? Or even parents and children on opposite sides. I mean, there can be so strong polarizing opinions in family relationships that the family doesn't work, or that the couple has to leave each other, or whatever, because they just can't resolve whatever conflict there is. And presence doesn't necessarily mean the problem is solved. What, in my experience, what it does is it takes away the animosity, it takes away the charge, the emotional charge in it, and just allows people's perspectives to be brought forward and given space to. Right. And then it can actually speed things like, okay, there's no common ground here. We're not going to find a common ground. So then we just go our different ways, for example, instead of people being destroyed and ending up, ill or drinking themselves into a stupor or whatever, because there's so much pain. So presence can be it is such a healing space because there's no danger in it. It's just a welcoming of what is, even when there's polarization, where there seems to be polarization. So that's kind of my way of thinking. Schools and families, I mean, any kind of unit, groups in work where people disagree on, one likes the boss, one doesn't like the boss, or you want this, person to run with another. Yeah, there's so many possibilities for polarization and so many possibilities for engaging in authentic dialogue instead.
Yeah, well, I mean, presence transcends the polarization.
Yeah.
Because in presence, and I mean, I guess there are various depths of presence, right? But ultimately, if I'm in a basic state of presence or being or whatever we call it, then I always like to say that at the very least, we could begin to see what we share is infinitely greater than what appears to divide us. And if we could see that, then it's going to change the way we view everything. It's going to suddenly I'm, like we said a few minutes ago, suddenly my opinion becomes much less important than my relationship with you.
Mm.
And
yeah, where that is.
And actually, so what you said, Miriam, is 100% true, that it doesn't necessarily mean that the problem goes away.
Right.
That is true. But I would suggest be open to the possibility, because if the role play that I was playing was my life, in that moment with that question and that realization that I was prioritizing my opinion over my relationship with other people, and I was associating them being worthy of me being with them agreeing with me, and not painting them with a broad brush, the problem disappeared. So it's true, it doesn't always go away. And it's also true that a lot of the things that we think are problems are just things that we've made up in our head. And they're the story that we're telling ourselves, that if this goes wrong, then this goes wrong, then this goes wrong, then we're on the way to we're Screwedville. But there's no guarantee that any of that's going to happen at all.
Mm.
And sometimes that was my experience of going through that. And that's the experience of all aha moments. It seems like aha moments have three ingredients. Number one is you got to get away from the can't see the forest for the trees situation and let your mind relax and just be open to receiving the wisdom. And when it comes, it generally comes in with a knowing. That's why we have the head smack. Oh my God, how did I miss that? And then oftentimes with that delivery of that aha moment, what we thought was a problem, it's like it vanished. It goes away, because now we can see the path clear, and it's like, oh, we just have to navigate this little tunnel here and we're all set. And it's a bit of a difference.
I agree. I think in certain instances, it's kind of like if you're coming at a problem from a place of lack, or a place where I risk losing something. And because I've been sitting here listening to you, esteemed gentlemen who I love immensely, and thinking neither one of you, well, put it another way, you're both men.
Thank you for noticing.
Having my perspective brought in, or a female perspective brought in, perhaps focusing on if females were to come forward in a certain way and gain something, which may look like you guys risk losing something, you might, even though you're present, consider it still as a problem. Like there needs to be this sort of willingness, or this sort of holistic vision where, okay, your gain is not necessarily my loss, really, because we all gain, right? But that it could take a bit of time to come to that. And I hear when you speak about, I'm not American, I'm Canadian. So just so that's right out there.
How'd she get in this conversation?
Yeah, really. The woman and the not American. But as I was listening to you speak about the election, and okay, Trump's been president before, and we had, whoever's been before, this idea of bringing in another person's perspective, do you gentlemen, are you able to see some of the situations from a female perspective, and what kind of differences, what kind of changes, and perhaps large changes that can affect women that would not affect you, at least seemingly not affect you, because you're not women, and how you see what I mean? And so it's not whether it's Trump is right or Kamala's right. It's like, what actually works best for everyone in general? And there's always going to be somebody who's going to feel like they've lost something if they're in that space. So I just thought I'd bring that in. It's this sort of ability to be present to the different perspectives and willing to see, yeah, it might look like I'm going to lose something, but the other person, it might be appropriate for the other person to gain something where we all, generally speaking, gain as a holistic unit. We all gain. And it can be difficult to see those other perspectives, like the woman's perspective, depending on what the issue is. That was the word I was looking for, the issue. Yeah. So I thought I'd just bring it in there. And because I'm Canadian, I'm not in this election, I'm not voting. It's just my way of looking at it from the outside and seeing some of the polarities that may not seem important to one gender, but may seem very important to another, as far as lifestyle goes and economy and all of that stuff.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and I don't know how to answer it, and I don't know if I can ever truly look at something from a female's perspective or even satisfy a female that I'm able to see something from her perspective. I don't know that. Let me just finish this, because what I'm wondering is if we are truly practicing presence, which, I mean, we define polarization, but if we, and I guess it defines on how we practice presence. To me, one of the practicing of presence is not wrestling with reality as it's unfolding, seeing what is unfolding and being present with it and adjust accordingly. So, you know, by most of the polls, half of the country is going to be thrilled tomorrow and half of it's going to be very upset. But if we are present and you get your way, you might say, okay, that's good. We got our way. Now what? What's next? And if we didn't get our way, it could still be the same thing. Now what? What do we do now in this moment that the person that we thought was awful has won?
Yep.
What do we do next?
Take a breath.
Take a breath. Keep breathing, baby.
Keep breathing.
I would say stay present as much as possible.
Yeah.
That is our message for pretty much everything.
Yeah, it's like if you're driving to a destination and you get a flat tire, that sucks, and there's lots of adverse consequences that may happen as a result of that. But your job is either to call AAA or, you know, the motor club or whoever, or open the trunk and get out your spare in the jack and get to work and start fixing it.
Can I play with that for just a second?
Sure.
We're going to have to wrap up in a
moment.
moment.
Yeah. Wait, we're at the end of time. I came in late, so it felt short.
Oh, please.
I don't have to say anything at all. I was just thinking, actually, one of the things I always like to say is, Fred, it's like when I hear you talk and when I was hearing you doing the dialogue with Bobby, it's like hearing myself. It's so funny sometimes. It's like, oh, we're so alike. If I get a flat tire in the middle of nowhere, which is not an unusual thing to do even in Norway or in Canada, it doesn't have to suck. Like I heard you say, Bobby, it sucks. I'm like, really? That wasn't where my...
Yeah.
I was like, but it's gorgeous, right? It's like, take in, again, the whole. It's like, okay, I have a flat tire. And what else? Because that's one thing amidst a universe, right? So I think presence affords us the opportunity to enjoy it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And using things like you just did to point out to me when I'm reflexively using some sort of conditioned judgment. You're right. It doesn't have to suck. And, you know, somewhere, some place, there's probably a woman who got a flat tire and a gentleman that stopped. And today they're married because of that flat tire. And they've got a great origin story of how they first got together. So that's probably a good note. We got started late today, folks, for tech issues, and we have hard stops now. So we're going to just kind of end it. Do you guys want to just tell people how to get a hold of you if they're interested in diving into this a little bit more detail?
Go ahead, Miriam.
Oh, thank you. You can. Okay, thank you. You can send me an email at that email address, or you can go to my website, which is www.centremex, CENTREMEX, Centremex. That's Center for Mastery and Excellence.com. You can find me there, and there's tons of information. So, and you are welcome to contact me. We can have a chat. Fred, I know you gotta hurry.
Yeah, we'll be fine. Well, you guys can check out it. It's really just in bare bones form at the moment, but you can check out the new website, which is personalundevelopment.com.
Ooh.
And oh, wait, maybe I never said that before. Yes,
no, it's the first time hearing it.
I have heard it, and it's yay.
and so that's just something there, and you can book a quick chat there if you'd like to learn more. My group is ongoing. It's just launched a few weeks ago, and that's been really fun. We still have some space left in that for people that would like to jump into that. It's an evergreen thing. You can jump in or out at your discretion. And although I think it'll be exhibiting poor judgment. I'm just kidding. And you can reach me here on Facebook, or I think it'll be easy enough to find me.
Yeah, cool. And I'm Bobby Cobb. I'm a liberation hypnotist, and the easiest way to get a hold of me is here on Facebook in my group called Our Mindful Life. That's kind of the first place that I announce a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. So see you in there. That is a free group here on Facebook that discusses these matters and replays a lot of these shows. So with that, guys, we will sign off for today. We will be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And how do you guys feel about presence and judgment, but judgment from that point of view that Miriam just did with me, of noticing that when we are reflexively judging instead of really responding to what is showing up?
How about same topic, different word, presence and discernment.
There it is. And just like that, we've got next week's show lined up. As we said earlier, we will not be thinking about that for the next 167 hours until this time next week, when we will dive into presence and discernment. Thanks, everybody, for joining us both live and on the replay. And thank you, Fred, and thank you, Miriam, for the generosity of your time.
Yay.
See you next time.